So thank you so much for joining on the third episode of Teen Talks powered by Inertia Teens. And today's episode is with Kids Inspire Differences. And we have Misha G and Devan here with us today. We are so happy to have you here. And could you please tell us a little more about yourself?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Devan. Outside of Kid, I love playing music. I play alto saxophone in a band I started called Making Trouble. I play Suzuki piano. I'm an Eagle Scout. I compete in speech and debate. And outside of that, I'm a competitive golfer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Misha. Thank you so much for having us today. We're so excited. A little bit more about me. I'm also a competitive participant in speech and debate. And I also am involved with various other philanthropic organizations here in Arizona. So that includes the National Charity League, Girl Scouts, and the Swift Youth Foundation. And I'm also on my varsity tennis team.
Wow, those are like so brilliant hobbies. I would love to see more of that later on and get to know that. And we all know that you both have started Kids Foundation. And what was the idea behind your venture?
Yeah, so Misha and I started Kid about 3 years ago. And so we were in 8th grade, but in 7th grade, we had this school project called the Bridge Project, where we were able to create anything we wanted. And coincidentally, Misha and I both created separate organizations that were aligned along the same cause of empowering youth using technology. And so they both had a similar purpose. And so Misha recognized that. And then in 8th grade, she asked if we wanted to join organizations. And I said yes. So now we have Kids Inspire Difference, where we can reach more people and have a bigger impact. And so, yeah, that was kind of the background of the founding of Kid.
Wow, in 8th grade, that must be really young. And what difficulties did you face since you were like in preteen and teen age while inventing it? So what were the difficulties that you had to deal with when you were getting started?
Yeah, so I think, in the beginning stages, there was a lot that we had to prepare. So, it required like a lot of research, and we met with a bunch of mentors in our community. We kind of spent this like whole summer where we just did a lot of research about like the nonprofit world and different youth-led initiatives, and just like more about like what we wanted to advocate for. Like, were we interested in advocating for a specific cause or various causes? What type of medium did we want to use? Did we want to focus more on social media, or did we want to, maybe have more of a blog? And so we had a bunch of ideas going into it. And over time, it really has changed. I think that's something that I want to emphasize. Like, it wasn't just this like overnight type of thing. We like sat down one time and we were like, okay, great. We know exactly what we're doing. Even after that summer of when we like created our website and our Instagram, since then, our mission, like just even the mission statement itself has changed many times. And I think that's always like, I don't know, sometimes people may, criticize that and be like, oh, you have to know what you're doing. But I think there's a lot of good in that as well, of like, as you learn about what works and what doesn't, that you kind of like change what you're doing to advocate for exactly what you want. So that's definitely something that we had challenges with, and we continue to learn and grow as an organization. But it definitely took a lot of like planning and research and meeting with other mentors who are already in the nonprofit and business world. So yeah.
Yes, I think growth is definitely a positive sign, which people don't often see, but growing and realizing what you really want to do and improving your venture is always really good. So I'm so proud of you both working so hard towards it. And I know maintaining a wonderful social media presence along with everything in life can be very hard. And how do you take care of your mental health while doing everything that you're doing right now?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Because I think you're 100% correct. Because sometimes, you know, we're constantly on social media and we are stressing about having to post every day or have to post at this certain time or get this amount of likes or this amount of shares, right? And we're so focused on these numbers. And it can definitely be draining to your mental health. I think that's something Misha and I have both felt. But something that I've learned in the past year is that you really need to be able to set healthy boundaries with your media that you use. So whether that means adding a screen time limit to your phone or computer or scheduling posts ahead of time, there are many ways you can get around this idea. And I think for me, I enjoy getting outside and yoga, specifically doing meditations, really had just made me more grounded, and gave me a better sense of perspective that it's not all about posting everything, you know? So that's really what worked for me, but you got to find what works for you.
Yeah, and I would also add to that. I've had a very, I don't know, similar experience to what Devan was saying, and I think it's just really important to recognize when you've reached your limit. And so it's kind of this idea of like quantity versus quality. Like once your quantity of work increases, like you have more posts to post, more blog articles, more meetings, and like all this work accumulates, oftentimes the quality of that work decreases. You become like more stressed and you have more on your plate, so you kind of like rush through a lot of things. So I think that it's like especially important to recognize when you've reached your limit, when your mental health is deteriorating and you're not creating effective and productive work, because then it's not even like worth it in the long run. And so we'll talk about this more a bit later, but this can be defined as the term like social justice burnout. And this is just the idea that as your mental health like deteriorates when you have a lot of like social activism work that you're involved with, because it's also important to recognize that a lot of like youth activism, a lot of the work that we do, the issues that we're advocating are not always like good things, that there's a lot of like tragic realities that we have to face. So I think it's important to recognize that, and like take a break when you need to, because a lot of these ideas are difficult things to like deal with. So like recognizing when you've reached your limit, when you like need to step back, take a break, as Devan said, like go outside, do some yoga, meditation, whatever works best for you. And then once you're in a better mental health state, you can come back and really tackle the work in a more effective way.
Yes, I think that is really true. And could you elaborate a little more on maintaining boundaries? I know there are so many things going on that sometimes it is difficult to manage work, school, hobbies, etc. And like you said, quantity versus quality is a very important thing. So, what would be your tip on that to teenagers who are struggling with it?
Yeah, so I think setting boundaries can take many different forms. I think it's first, as I was talking about, with your devices, but it's also with like media around you. I think especially right now during the COVID pandemic, setting boundaries with news is especially important. So I think this is something that many of us have felt. Like we've been reading the news and it's just stressful, like seeing all the COVID numbers, and it can just be overwhelming, right? So there's so many other things going on. And I think just being able to say, I'm going to look at the news for this period of time, or just like once in the morning, right? And then that's it. Like it's good to be informed, but not over informed, because that can deteriorate your mental health. And so I think that's really important to recognize. And it's hard, like you want to be educated, you want to be informed about these different issues, but that ends up hurting yourself when it's too much. So I think recognizing when you're body saying, I'm overwhelmed, and recognizing when that's too much for you, and just taking a step back and saying, I'm going to do this, that here, and then I'm going to go enjoy the rest of my day.
Yes, I think that is such a good tip. And oftentimes, like during COVID, we found it so difficult to maintain that boundary, especially being in home and being exposed to all certain types of media around you. So that was a challenge, but I think your tip would really help someone who is going through it. So have you both heard of the term performative activism?
Yeah, so that's actually something that we really emphasize within like the work that we do. We're always subconsciously thinking about this idea of performative activism. And for our listeners who may not know, this is basically just the idea that people engage in different social justice activism only to increase their social capital rather than, actually being devoted to the cause. So this can take like many different forms, but like one that comes to mind, for example, like in the US, most or more recently, during like the Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of people would like post these like black squares on their Instagram account without actually taking any sort of action. So like they post the black square and put like hashtag like Blackout Tuesday, along with like the trend of raising awareness for the Black Lives Matter movement. But then that's kind of where their activism stopped. And like a lot of people don't realize, but I mean, your activism needs to extend more than what you post on social media. Like if you're truly passionate about a cause, it's important to not just like simply post about something and then call it a day. Like, go do your research, become more educated about the issue. Research how is it specifically affecting people in your community where you live. What are some ways that you can take action? Are there any petitions you can sign? Are there any, LTEs you can write? Are there any emails you can send to your legislators? I don't know, are there like specific physical protests you can attend? Like taking serious action, like donating to a campaign or speaking to someone who's more knowledgeable about the issue. There's a lot of different forms that your activism can take, but this idea of like performative activism and just like reposting on your social media is really not one of the most effective ways. So that's something that we really focus on. So like, for example, we recently created a post called What is Mental Health? In line with our mental health campaign that we have right now. And so we really like did a lot of research beforehand, dissected the term. We made kind of like a carousel post. We also made sure to like include our resources, our sources that we used at the end and everything. But then afterwards, like in our caption, we wrote, okay, so if you're like, inspired by like mental health awareness, how can you take action? So then we led people to click the link in our bio and like donate to our campaign, or they can go watch our interviews with various activists. So like those are more concrete ways that you can take action besides just like liking our post. And so that's something we definitely focus on. We, host different speakers to come talk on our platform so people can really, be as educated as possible about these issues. And then also they can go donate to our campaign. And all of the money we're raising right now goes to the JED Foundation. And so they're an organization that focuses on young adult mental health and suicide prevention. They're one of the largest nonprofits in the US dedicated to that cause. And so all of our donations go towards creating mental health programs in high schools and college universities across the nation. And they really implement these programs that focus on like equity and inclusivity and making sure that all teens have proper access to mental health resources. So that's like a great way people can get involved and make sure they are making a difference.
I've seen all your campaigns and everything is so wonderfully put forward. And like you said, please go ahead. If you're watching this video, you can go ahead and donate in the link in the description. And you can watch their mental health series on IGTV. It is wonderful. And I think performative activism can be something which we see daily as well. Just another example would be how commercial companies put up the Pride logo during June and then they remove it later on. And could you please elaborate on how posting stories or, adding to this performative activism of sharing post degrades the quality of your activism or a cause in general?
Yeah. So kind of similar to how I said before, I feel like there's a lot of social pressure within the social media world. I think like I even felt it myself, especially like last summer as COVID began. A lot of research has been done that there was a huge increase in social activism. A lot more teens were at home. They did not have, places to go. So that resulted in a lot of more, social media use and a lot of there was a lot going on around that time. And so people went to activism and they started like reposting things on their stories. And it kind of got like, as you said, like degrading to the actual cause. Like I'd be like, clicking through my story and like one person would have like 10 different posts that they reposted. Well, at that point, like all those different issues are being like overshadowed by one another, and like people aren't going to take the time to like actually click the post and read about it. So that's just kind of like ineffective. But one thing that I saw that could sometimes be beneficial is that maybe someone like reposted something and then afterwards they posted something about like a paragraph about like how they were affected by that issue or why they think it's important to them, and then besides just reposting it, they said, okay, now go click the link in my bio to like a Black Lives Matter card.com or something, where that would have like a full list of links to petitions and how you can take action. And so I think that's a lot more effective rather than just like reposting something you saw your friend reposted. And another thing that also is involved with this issue is that a lot of times people repost things without even like reading it or doing any research, and that can spread a lot of misinformation. So like you'll go and see, oh, your friend posted something, it looks aesthetic or something, so let me repost it on my story too. And then they don't even like read the caption, go learn more about the account that reposted it, and then for all you're just part of this cycle that's spreading more misinformation about the cause. Maybe the organization is spreading things that like don't even align with your own values, and they didn't do their proper research. And so that's just really, contributing to this negative cycle of, spreading misinformation and not actually taking action.
Yes, I agree. And what would be your advice to all the youth that is involved in activism? And could you elaborate a little more on the term activism fatigue and how it affects today's teenagers?
Yeah, so in my opinion, I don't feel like us youth, I feel like we have to be an activist. I feel like we don't really have an option, right? Because there's so many issues in our world that we care about. There's so many things that we want fixed, and we don't have any chance of fixing or mending them if we don't start now. And so it has to start with us. It has to start with our action. And so when you mentioned activism fatigue, so I think this is a term where one can feel tired or tired of the systems or the injustices that they're seeing in their communities, but they feel tired of the injustices that they're advocating for, and it's basically when you feel like whatever you're doing, you're advocating on your social media or you're speaking about this, but you don't feel like your impact is being made and your activism is being appreciated. So I think it's important to recognize that youth activism fatigue, it is normal and it's natural to feel like your individual actions are pointless, but they're not, because you are making an impact. Your action is incredibly important because activism is really all about numbers. It's about strength in numbers. So the more people that are doing it, the more impact it's going to make. So the main thing is you have to take care of yourself first so you can better advocate for the issues that you're passionate about. Because once there's 100, 200, 300 people advocating for the same issue, that's when the voices of backing this issue are going to be heard. So you can't stop your action.
So what would be your biggest tip to someone who is trying to keep up with their advocacy? And like we all know, social media is about numbers sometimes. So seeing something that you have worked hard on and not getting that much recognition could degrade someone's motivation, you can say. So what would be your tip to them?
Yeah, I can talk about this. So I think it's really important to like prioritize what you're extremely passionate about. So like identifying specific causes within the, many social justice issues that are under this big umbrella of like activism, and identifying what you can relate to, what resonates with you, doing more research about that cause and really finding things that you're passionate about. We found that as we have explored like many different causes, the ones that we're more passionate about and that like hit closer to home, allows us to spend more time on that. And we just have this like bigger drive and motivation to tackle those issues. But yeah, as Devan said, I think it's really important to recognize this idea of like activism, fatigue, social justice burnout. They're all kind of just similar ideas, just like defined slightly differently. But like recognizing when you've reached your limit, when your work is no longer productive and effective, and taking a step back is really important. So like it's kind of like ironic that we're doing a mental health campaign advocating for mental health, but even like through this advocacy sometimes we can feel some strain on our own mental health. So we've also taken time to recognize that and really like listen to what our speakers are saying and taking those tips to heart, and taking time to take a break from the work that we're doing. And I think this can go for all youth activists, to recognize when their involvement needs to take a little break, I guess.
I think activism and our personal growth in general is connected, and it is all about learning and growing and keeping on the learning process active. So, what are some of the stigmas that you think exist in activism world, and are there any stigmas that you came across or any stereotypes you would like to discuss?
Yeah, so I think ageism is something that's definitely present in our activism work and others as well. But from Misha and I's experience, back when we were talking about like how we started KID and we were like going to mentors and we were going to different people who were founded different nonprofits to learn from them, I feel like a lot of times we'd go to them and we'd have this idea in our head, right, of what our vision is, right? And I think a lot of kids have this vision, and that's really where it starts, And then from there, we know we want to do something. We know we want to create something about this issue that we're passionate about. And so we knew we wanted to create a nonprofit, and we were saying like, well, how do we do that? Right. And so we met with some of our mentors and teachers and successful people we knew in our community to get advice from them. But one thing we were told a lot was, don't set your goals too high. Like, don't come up with these big things that you want to do because, you're too young for that. Right. And unfortunately, that is something that we were told a lot. And while that is true to some extent, it can be degrading. And I know Misha and I have both felt this, because just because you're young doesn't mean you can't achieve this or achieve this goal or do great things. So that's definitely something we were told a lot. And it was one of the difficulties in starting a nonprofit, but it's definitely one of the stigmas that a lot of youth face.
Yes, and I think even I have gone through that. When I started my initiative, it was something similar. People do say certain things, but I think at a moment we just need to let it go and focus towards the activism goal we really want to achieve. And I think our age wouldn't matter in that in any way, because mental health or anything like that is so much embedded in our system that we do not realize that even kids, even very small kids, are facing that. So I think we need to overcome that stigma and try to teach younger kids about activism and mental health so that they do not go through what we have been through.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And so another issue that is also kind of like prevalent within the nonprofit world is kind of this like westernization of activism. And so along with that, this term like white savior complex comes to mind. And so this is basically the idea where like a person of power who often comes from like a Western nation tries to provide help to like non-white people, maybe in like third world nations or something like that, but it ends up being like in a self-serving manner. And so this can take like many different forms, but unfortunately, a lot of nonprofits, you know, like they are, for example, asking people for clothing donations. And so they gather all these clothing donations and then like send it to this third world country. But then this ends up causing these third world countries to become reliant on like first world nations to give them donations, whether that's like, I don't know, clothing or volunteer help or different things. And this prevents and like hinders their own progress as a nation to become like self-sufficient. So I think that's something that like is often overlooked. These huge nonprofits take on this like you know, business like outlook and think that, oh no, we're like helping these people who need our help, without actually like going to that third world nation and asking them, how can we best support you? They just like assume based off of, I don't know, stereotypes or assumptions or what they think is best without actually interacting with these people and asking them what they need. And so on a larger scale, like once this happens a lot, once, you know, a certain community is constantly relying on like clothing donations, then, you know, the people there will no longer produce their own clothing, and then they end up just suffering more because they become so reliant on someone else. And then, you know, their economy doesn't grow and it leads to a lot of issues there. But so that's just one thing that I wanted to emphasize, is making sure to become an ally to the causes that you're advocating for and not a savior. And really talking to people and understanding what they need, rather than just focusing on what is best for your social or political gain.
Yes, I think that cause was that was very insightful, and I did not know so much about it, but I would love to learn more about it. And I have seen this happen, and this also contributes to having this feeling where people think that if I donate something to a cause, or like clothing you had said, it would directly reach and benefit those people. But then we should really take a step back and understand the cause we are donating for, and like you said, become an ally to that cause. So that is really important for teens to understand as well.
Yes, I would definitely agree. It also kind of relates to this idea of like voluntourism. And so this is basically when, you know, a volunteer would go to another country and just like, you know, go there for their own, like, I don't know, traveling purposes. And they'd be like, okay, well, now I'm going to take my stop here to help out this small community, get a few pictures, show my followers that I'm like making a difference. And then, you know, what happens is oftentimes they like, you know, go for a few hours, do their volunteer work, and then get on a plane, leave, and completely forget about that issue. So it's really just like another form of that like performative activism type of thing, where you go into a third world nation and think that you're helping someone, you go volunteer for hours, get that like feel good feeling, and then depart, you know, physically and emotionally, and never return to like actually advocating for that issue and taking real action.
I just wanted to add on to that too, because I think this is something that we see a lot, and it's important to recognize that going to volunteer somewhere, going to volunteer at a charity or at an orphanage or something, that's good. Like, definitely do do that. But the problem starts when, like Misha was saying, you go for a day, you put it on your social media, it's for your own, it makes you feel good, and then you leave. So I think it's important to say, like, you need to find ways that are more, that are less, that are more, that create lasting solutions, right? So instead of giving a child this one thing, you can teach, instead of giving the clothing example, instead of giving them one piece of clothing, you teach them how to sustainably make their own clothing or something like that. So it's something that creates an impact that lasts for a longer period of time than just going and volunteering at an orphanage for one day and then leaving. So I think that's important to recognize.
I think one more thing which I would like to add on is going and listening to these people's story, because stories are something that stay with us forever. And once you hear those people's heartbreaking story, it will change your mind, and you might learn a lot about it rather than just clicking pictures or just donating. So before donating, you can learn about them and what problems they really face instead of assuming something. And I think that could be leading us on our last question here. What would be your opinion on privileged people and privilege in general, and how can we use our privilege for good and benefit of others as well?
Yeah, so I think this is something that really aligns with KID as well, because that's something that's in our mission, like using your privilege to empower youth across the world. So I think we must use the privilege that we have as youth to advocate for issues that we are passionate about and create real change in our communities. So whether that means getting involved in organizations that are advocating for issues that you're passionate about or that you want to see implemented into the government structure and into your community, you can join that organization and really be a part of that change. So like joining, there's some really easy ways to do that. Like for KID, it would just be applying to join our team or our KID community, where you're involved with all these other like-minded youth who are passionate about similar issues. So you can have these conversations and discussions, which really, one, helps educate you, but it also helps you better teach others about that issue. And if you are of more privilege, you can donate to different causes and different organizations, like donating to our mental health campaign, which creates tangible resources in schools across the US. But really just educating yourself first, so you can better educate others and use your privilege to create change in your communities is really important.
Yeah, and I could just kind of go to add to that. I think like over time, I've become more aware of my privilege as I, grow as a person in this world and see other people's way of life. I'm the daughter of first generation immigrants from Iran, and I've seen a lot that my family has done to sacrifice to like get me to the place where I am today. So I've always kind of like felt this need to give back to my community in any way that I can. I realize that I'm getting this education and I have these resources through social media and the mentors that I have in my life that a lot of other teens around the world don't have. So, I think it's really important, as Devan was saying, to recognize your privilege of like what type of access to various resources you have in your community that others don't, and really using that to give back and help to people who need it. So if there are specific issues that align with you, doing your research and reaching out to those communities, it kind of goes back to this idea that we were talking about earlier, and learning how to be like a proper ally to these communities and really advocating for them. I think that's one of the best ways that we can use our privilege to help others rather than hurt.
I agree, and I find that really relatable, being from a family where we have moved from another country to a better country for everything better. And being in a position where I am able to do certain things, which so many people I know in my country aren't, is something that you need to realize and direct it in the proper channel. So, after that, moving on to our last question, which is the Teen Talks question of the day, which we ask everyone, which is, if you could say anything to your younger self about a myth related to mental health, what would that be and why would you say that?
Yeah, well, for me, when I was younger, I really didn't know much about mental health or how important it was to living a healthy life. And so I would probably tell my younger self that going to see a therapist is not a weakness. Reflecting on your feelings, talking about your feelings is not a weakness. In fact, it's necessary to growing as a person. And you must take time to prioritize yourself through different practices that you find help better your own mental health and your body. So for me, as I mentioned before, that's yoga, that's meditation. But I really just can't preach enough how important it is to take some time to your body and to your mind. And so whether that is through yoga, which I highly recommend doing, because that's an oriented practice that's for your mind and body. But whatever that means is find a time to do that every day. And that's something that I've realized in the past years.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I like the part of this question that's like, what would you say to your younger self? So I think this is really an epiphany that I've had recently. But I think I was definitely a victim to the stereotype of like, oh, mental health is like a joke, like it doesn't need my attention. And I kind of like, kept on pushing myself past these boundaries. And I would like, fall into this like workaholic attitude where I would like make a long list of things to do, then spend hours on each of them and never take a break for myself. And I think this really only went to like hurt me more in the long run. So for anyone who's like listening, who's maybe just a bit earlier on in this realization, I really recommend like going out there and like finding some sort of research to help you, because I ignored it for a long time. And in the long run, that did not help my mental health at all. And more recently, I've taken action towards like reaching out to a counselor in my community and like taking time to speak with them about like mental health issues that I'm dealing with. And I found that this has really helped me because it goes back to that idea, like once you reach a certain point, you can't really go back, and the quality of the work that you're creating, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be like activism work, but just like your overall like physical state deteriorates. And a lot of research has been done that if your mental health is not there, if you are not in a good, positive state, then this will only reflect poorly towards others around you. You'll become maybe more negative and hostile, and it'll lower your immune system, and you'll become like weak and fatigued, and it's just not, it's not a good thing at all. So I think it's really important to seek treatment. A lot of schools have resources, whether that's like a guidance counselor, reach out to your doctor. There's a lot of resources on social media. The JED Foundation that we're partnered with at this time has a lot of amazing resources, both on their website, but also with therapists and other organizations that they're partnered with that I would highly recommend for anyone who's struggling to reach out to. There's a lot of hotline numbers as well. We can also give that information to Sameera to put in the description. But yeah, there's a lot of resources out there. And I really recommend just simply doing a quick Google search, finding those resources, and taking action to better yourself.
Yes, thank you for talking about it. I have seen and felt that workaholic environment or the toxic positivity people create around doing like a certain list of tasks daily. And I think one thing which I would like to add is how in BIPOC community, especially BIPOC women, are told that to get to the standard of success other people have, and maybe it's because of their privilege, you need to work twice or thrice as hard as others. So I think that really, stresses you out and makes you normalize this idea of positivity, whereas it's just draining you out. And like Misha said, there are so many resources which you can seek and, you know, understand that this is a real issue and we should stop normalizing it. So, what would be your last message to our audience about mental health and inertia teens in general?
Yeah, so I just want to end by saying, if you are inspired by Misha or I's words, get inspired difference would greatly appreciate your support by following our page, following our Instagram, sharing our posts. And since we are in the middle of our mental health campaign, donating in the link in our bio to our mental health awareness campaign in partnership with the JED Foundation. So JED, Misha mentioned, is the nation's leading nonprofit for young adult mental health and suicide prevention. So donating any small amount of money would mean the world to us. All donations are going straight to providing funds to implement JED's mental health programs in schools across the US. So if you'd like to take action, go check out the link in our Instagram bio. And so that's really just an amazing first step to join the movement towards increasing mental health and the well-being of teens everywhere.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that. Currently, we are in our mental health speaker series where we are interviewing various advocates within the mental health community, anywhere from founders of youth-led initiatives focusing on mental health, or professional therapists, or just your average person who is relatively knowledgeable about the issue and wants to share their story. So I highly recommend checking that out as well on our Instagram page. But I just really wanted to emphasize that it all starts with like having these conversations about mental health, about, youth activism. So I really appreciate you having us. I think we had an amazing conversation, and I hope to be a part of many more like this.
Thank you so much for being part of our episode 3. We really learned a lot today, and it's really important for our audience and us in general to take a step back and implement these in our lives. And like you said, advocating for a cause like mental health, the very first step is talking about it. And it can be something as small as anything, just anything in general. We do not have these conversations a lot. And especially with teenagers, we need to start doing this a lot more. And I think this episode was one of the few steps we can take towards mental health, and I would really recommend you to have a conversation with your family or your friends about mental health. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Sameera.